Welcome to Boston. Kevin Kinder, Greg Hunter, BlueGoldNews.com, and here we are yet again at another Sweet 16, third one in 4 years for the Mountaineers. This one's a little different, though. Obviously, a very high-level club in Villanova. Not that West Virginia's faced, nobody's the last two, Kentucky and Gonzaga, obviously. But this one is a different feel because it's a slightly different style. So first of all, let's look at Villanova. Jalen Brunson gets a lot of, attention. Mikal Bridges gets a ton of attention. But they've got at least five guys that can score.
They do. I talked to Eric Martin about that some today at West Virginia's media availability, and he compared them. He said they're sort of similar to Kansas in that they can spread the floor and have a lot of shooters, but that they're really different in that they have five guys that can pass the ball, that can work off screens, and that can set screens. They can basically execute all parts of their offense all over the floor. They don't have one or two guys that are just stuck inside or post players. So from that perspective, they give a lot of teams trouble. West Virginia's got a big challenge ahead of it. They think that they can hopefully still, create some of the disruption that they've done to most teams this year. But you're right, it is just kind of a different looking team. There's not really anybody else that you can compare them to.
Yeah, and I got sort of what you got as well in terms of talking to players and talking to coaches, in that a little bit of Kansas, but then maybe a tad bit of Marshall, in that Penova could step outside and shoot, and that's going to create some matchup problems for West Virginia's bigs. I talked to Logan Rout, and he says, he and Sagabal Kanate and Magic Bender, whomever, are all going to have to be very wary of the bigs that can step outside and shoot.
And we've seen this from Sags. He can defend outside. I'm really impressed with how much he has picked up on hedging, being able to come out, attack ball handlers, but still get back to his guy and pick him up. But you're right, he can't give, and none of West Virginia's big men can give those 2 or 3 steps, because they'll come out, they'll go off a screen, run opposite, pick and pop. They've got a number of different ways that they can get those guys free for shots. So, yeah, it's a defensive challenge in a little bit different way for some of West Virginia's bigs.
West Virginia, at least in terms of Javon Carter, has seen at least a little bit of Villanova in the past. He and Jalen Brunson played on an AAU team together in Chicago. Brunson, obviously, his dad played at Temple, so you think of him as a Philly guy, but he really grew up because his dad was in the NBA. He grew up in a number of different spots, went to high school in the Chicago area. Does the familiarity with Brunson help Javon at all?
Well, asking Javon, you don't know, because he was in one-word answer mode, and West Virginia fans are hopeful some of that is being locked in. I think so to some degree, just because he's watched him, he's played alongside him, hasn't necessarily played against him a bunch, although I'm sure they scrimmaged and did things like that, that give you an idea. But one of the things that Brunson said in his interview, in one of his interviews, was that, how different Javon is, how much he's improved. And I'm sure the same is true for Jalen Brunson. So, any familiarity that they might have gained from high school days, whatever, not sure how much that carries over here.
Yeah, we've certainly seen the change in Javon Carter over his 4 years at West Virginia in his improvement. So with that comes down to it, what does it involve for West Virginia? What do they have to do? Is it a matter of guarding? Is it a matter of hitting shots? Is it a matter of everything?
Well, I think rebounding is one big one. I think Villanova's going to make shots. You hope West Virginia shoots the ball like it did in San Diego. And if those two things happen, then I think second chances become even more critical. Because if you're matching those, bouncing those against each other, then a team that gets 10, 12, 14 second chance points, that could be really big in a game like this. I think both teams will guard well. Villanova's defense is probably a little bit underrated. Just a lot of things that both teams do that kind of clash or match up head-to-head here. But if I had to pick one thing out, I think it's rebounding, especially on the defensive end.
It's Thursday afternoon here in Boston. By this point, we were supposed to have 48 feet of snow on the ground here. Obviously, there was a lot of change in travel plans. West Virginia University left the whole day early. They were less than 24 hours in Morgantown between the turnaround from San Diego to getting back on a plane to come to Boston because of the fear of the weather. A lot of fans, certainly media types, tried to get here ahead of the weather. Turns out it wasn't a big issue. There's very little snow on the ground. A couple inches probably came, but it's already melting. But just the travel issues that West Virginia has faced since San Diego. I mean, going all the way out, 3,000 miles out, 3,000 miles back. You were delayed in coming back a little bit, actually over, 12 hours because you couldn't fly out that night. Now this whole situation, is that a problem? How does that affect anybody?
I think it has to affect you some. And I know West Virginia is playing the "we do this all the time" card. And so I don't think maybe it's so much a mental thing, but physically it's got to. I mean, you've got time change, and you're expecting to get a couple nights rest, and now you've only got one. And hey, you got to go get some clean clothes. And we don't think about all these things as they affect them because obviously they have some support staff to help them from the basketball side, but from their own side, they've still got to go do all that kind of stuff and probably, make some class adjustments and things like that. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that go into it. And, you can say it's an excuse, but I think it's a real challenge. It's something that is going to affect you unless you're, really focused. You have everything lined out, ready to go. It could definitely play a role.
Yeah, I don't know if it was exhaustion or just kids learning how to fly on a plane and sleep, but there was an air conditioner issue on the flight out of the Clarksburg-Bridgeport airport to come here. There was smoke in the cabin. Hugs joked a little bit about it, how there were some support staff, really upset and saying Hail Marys and everything. They asked the players about it. Most of them didn't even know what happened because they were already asleep. So I don't know if it's just, totally exhaustion on their part, or they just learned to sleep on a plane.
I think that's probably the latter. They're used to that with the 8-9 Big 12 trips, the trip to Germany, obviously things going other places. So it probably just didn't bother them. And of course, Hugs is going to, play that up to the, get a little bit of comedic effect for it too. But yeah, when you look at all of those things taken together, and especially the time, it's hard to go all the way to the West Coast. We're not talking about one time zone. You're talking all the way to the Pacific and then come back. And, now we've been on two coasts in in about 3 days span of time. It makes a difference.
Yeah, 3,400 miles between San Diego and Boston. I did look that up. The nice thing about getting into town Tuesday late afternoon is West Virginia was able to secure some tickets to the NBA game that night, Celtics and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Obviously a big matchup in the NBA market, so kids seem a little bit jazzed about that.
Yeah, they did. I think they had a good time there, and that was probably as good of a mental break as anything else. Hey, go watch some places where and watch some guys that these players emulate and look up to, and they don't have to think about the scouting report for a couple of hours. We've got a little bit more on that on Issa Ahmad, one of his high school teammates, plays for the Celtics now. So you can go obviously read about that on BlueGoldNews.com. But I think overall, that's the one plus out of it. Hey, you're here one extra day, so maybe the travel to here, which wasn't bad for them, obviously. Maybe you can scratch that down a little bit.
Yeah, certainly. And West Virginia's got 48 hours to go before 24 hours. Yeah. I've lost track of the days. The travel is affecting me as well. 24 hours to go before they actually play a game. So start to tone down a little bit in terms of what they do, some walkthroughs and things like that. But obviously the big event comes tomorrow night, 7:27, according to the NCAA at TD Garden. So, any ideas what to expect? I think the Villanova people don't quite know what to expect, but we certainly have seen West Virginia enough to know that they can be really good, but sometimes they aren't as well. So I have no clue as to what to expect tomorrow night.
Yeah, this one is really tough one to read. And, obviously West Virginia needs to at least make some shots. That's, if they have another 32 or 33% shooting day, they're probably going home. But, how much can they disrupt Villanova's offense? I don't expect them to force a ton of turnovers, but it's just more about the disruption to me at this point. Can they make them a little bit uncomfortable, make the passes not so wide open, pressure the ball a little bit, push them away, just make it tougher for the Wildcats to score? I think that's one of the keys along with rebounding for West Virginia. But, how does it all plays out? If one team or the other shoots it like it did last weekend, they're probably going on to Sunday because both teams shot really well in the first couple of rounds.
Yeah, you said rebounding was a key issue earlier. You've been with this team every step along the way in the postseason in terms of Kansas City and San Diego. Anything else, any individual that you say, okay, if he plays well, West Virginia's got a real good chance, but if he comes up empty, it could be a real struggle?
It's kind of easy to say Esau Ahmad just because he has played pretty well for the most part, and West Virginia is advancing. West Virginia has gotten really good play from Beto Bolden at times. Last couple games have not been his best games this year, so you'd like to see that bounce back. But, if you really want to get obvious, it has to be Javon Carter. And if he would have an off game, which would be very rare, that really knocks West Virginia down. But, if I had to pick one, I'd say they need to have the well-rounded Esau Ahmad that drives the ball to the basket, scores the points, gets 5 or 6 rebounds, plays good defense, gets in the passing lanes. I think that is one guy West Virginia has to have if they want to move on till Sunday.
Yeah, as you said, you had a nice story with Esau on our website. We've got plenty of others in terms of stories on the website for this afternoon. More to come this evening. Obviously, a ton more throughout Friday and obviously post-game Friday night. So keep it right on BlueGoldNews.com. We'll have more throughout the evening. And as I said, as West Virginia moves into the Sweet 16 game against Villanova Friday evening. That's it for the BlueGoldNews.com. I have another report for you tomorrow.